Rain hammered the windshield as Rafik's car coughed its last breath on the lonely road cutting through the countryside. Darkness swallowed the edges of the world, and the storm made it impossible to see farther than a few steps ahead. With no signal on his phone and no passing cars for miles, he followed the faint glow of a single window burning in the distance. The house stood at the top of a small hill, its wooden frame sagging like it had been waiting far too long for someone to arrive. A crooked sign dangled near the front steps, swaying in the wind. Guest house, it read, though the lettering looked freshly scratched, as if carved by something impatient. Inside, the air was strangely warm, carrying the scent of old wood soaked in time. The caretaker, a thin old man with eyes that refused to linger too long on anything, offered him a room with a stiff nod. He spoke little, and when he did, his words sounded cautious, as though he was warning Rafik without actually saying anything. The floorboard sighed under every step, almost relieved to be touched again after who knows how long. Rafik tried to ignore the uneasy feeling crawling up his spine, the sense that the house wasn't simply sheltering him, but watching him. As he settled into the dimly lit room, the storm outside grew louder, but something else began to rise beneath it, a low, rhythmic tapping that seemed to echo from the hallway walls. At first it sounded like branches hitting the siding, but soon it became too deliberate, too steady, too human. Then came the faint murmuring, a breathy whisper slipping under his door like a draft. He pressed his ear to the wood, heart pounding, just in time to hear the whisper count softly, 1, 2, 3, though he knew for certain he was the only guest in the house. The storm raged, the numbers grew louder, and every instinct in Rafik's body screamed that he should leave, but something about the house, the way the shadows curled around the ceiling, the way the walls seemed to close in when he moved too quickly, made it clear that leaving wouldn't be simple. And when the whisper reached a number 1 higher than it should have, a cold breath brushed against the back of his neck, as though whatever the house had counted was already standing behind him. Focuses on the moment Rafik arrives at the isolated guest house, and expanding it reveals how his decision to seek shelter becomes the subtle beginning of something far more sinister. Rafik's car breaking down during the violent storm is not just an inconvenience, it is the first push that forces him toward a place he never intended to visit. The road he had been driving on was narrow, washed in sheets of rain, and bordered by dense, silent fields that appeared endless in the flashes of lightning. As his car sputtered and died, he felt the weight of the countryside pressing around him, as if the world were shrinking to funnel him toward a single destination. When he stepped out of the vehicle, the icy wind slapped across his face, carrying the metallic scent of the storm and something else he could not identify, a faint, earthy odor like old soil disturbed after many years of stillness. With no signal on his phone, he had no choice but to search for shelter, and that was when he noticed the faint glow of a window far up the hill. The walk toward the house felt longer than it should have, with the darkness swallowing the path behind him and the rain chilling him to the bone. The house appeared slowly, its silhouette sharpening through the storm, and even before he reached the porch, he sensed something unnerving. It wasn't the structure itself, though its sagging wooden frame and aging paint gave it a haunted, weary air, but rather the strange stillness surrounding it. There were no signs of life except for the flickering light, no cars, no movement behind the curtains, not even the rustling of animals that usually inhabited rural nights. It felt as though the house was holding its breath, waiting for him. The caretaker's presence added another layer of discomfort. His hollow-cheeked face, dim eyes, and the way he avoided direct gaze made Rafik feel more like an intruder than a welcomed guest. The moment that extra number is spoken, the air changes around him, thickening with an invisible presence. It feels as if the house itself has acknowledged him in a way he cannot reverse, marking him as part of whatever ritual unfolds every night at this exact hour. Rafik backs away from the door, realizing that the counting isn't simply observing, it is choosing, and the house is very aware that someone new has entered its domain. Reveals the growing impossibility of the house's interior and how the locked room becomes a threat rather than a simple architectural feature. After the unsettling midnight count, Rafik wakes the next morning determined to convince himself that the whispers and footsteps were a trick of exhaustion. The storm has eased, sunlight filters dimly through the dusty curtains, and the house seems quieter, almost pretending to be ordinary. But the memory of the whispered numbers taps at his mind, urging him to explore the hallway where the counting took place. As he steps out of his room, he notices the corridor looks a little longer than he remembers from the night before, the wooden planks stretched in a way that makes him uneasy. He walks slowly, examining each door, until he reaches the far end, where he finds a small, heavy door with a tarnished brass knob. It is locked, and something about the lock looks ancient, as if it hasn't been opened in decades. He frowns, trying to recall if he saw this door when he first arrived. He is sure he didn't. He remembers the hallway clearly. The caretaker had led him past only 3 doors before showing him his room. But now there are 4. The locked door seems to lean slightly inward, its frame crooked, as though it was squeezed into place overnight. When he presses his ear against it, hoping to hear movement or voices, he hears nothing but a distant, hollow ringing sound, like wind passing through an empty chamber far below the floor. A cold shiver crawls up his back, and he steps away, but curiosity gnaws at him. He decides to walk back toward his room and count the doors again, whispering the numbers under his breath. When he reaches the end and turns around, the hallway seems subtly altered. The wallpaper patterns appear stretched in strange angles, the boards creak in different places, and the locked door now sits slightly closer than before, as though the house is pushing it toward him. He blinks several times, convinced his tired mind is playing tricks, and walks back to double-check. This time, the locked door is farther, positioned on the opposite side of the hallway. Rafik's stomach drops. He reaches out and touches the wall, feeling a faint vibration thrumming beneath the surface. The house is shifting, rearranging itself as if alive, as if responding to his curiosity. The locked door remains the only consistent element, reappearing no matter where he stands, always just out of reach, always sealed. Its presence feels intentional, almost watchful. Every time he looks away, it seems to move closer, like a predator inching forward each time its prey blinks. Rafik realizes with sinking dread that the door isn't meant to be opened by him, it's meant to trap him into noticing it, drawing him deeper into the house's strange and hungry design. Focuses on the arrival of the pale, silent figure and how each appearance deepens the sense that the house is not only aware of Rafik, but actively watching and closing in on him. After spending the day trying to understand the hallway's shifting layout and the impossible behavior of the locked door, Rafik feels worn down, mentally and physically. The caretaker remains distant, offering short answers and refusing to meet his eyes, as if terrified of saying the wrong thing. When Rafik tries to ask about the extra room, the caretaker's expression tightens, and he mutters that certain questions invite attention. He will not elaborate. The warning lingers in Rafik's mind as night settles over the house once more, thicker and darker than before. Dinner passes in uneasy silence, every sound in the old building amplified, the ticking of the clock, the groaning of the beams, the whisper of shifting wind outside. By the time Rafik returns to his room, he already senses he will not sleep easily. He lies awake for hours, staring at the ceiling as shadows ripple faintly across it, though no light source moves. His eyelids grow heavy despite his efforts to stay alert. When he finally drifts into a shallow sleep, he wakes with a jolt, sensing movement in the room. The air is cold enough to sting his skin, a sudden drop that feels unnatural. At first he thinks it's his imagination, but then he sees it, a pale figure standing at the far corner of the room. It is motionless, almost blending with the wall, its shape blurry yet unmistakably human. No sound accompanies its presence, no footsteps announced its arrival. It simply stands, facing him, as if studying him in silence. Fear freezes him in place, but he forces himself to blink, hoping the figure will vanish like a dream. It doesn't. Instead, when he opens his eyes again, it seems slightly closer, though he cannot recall seeing it move. His pulse thunders in his ears as he sits up, trying not to make noise, as though any sound might provoke it. The figure remains still throughout the night, only disappearing when the first grey light of dawn leaks through the curtains. Exhausted and shaken, Rafik convinces himself it might have been a hallucination caused by fear and lack of sleep. But the next night, precisely after the house completes its eerie midnight counting, the figure returns. This time it stands at the foot of his bed. Its face is indistinct, blurred as though smeared by unseen fingers, but its posture communicates unmistakable intent. It is watching, waiting, drawing nearer with each passing night. Rafik notices that the colder the room becomes, the closer the figure stands, and that the chill feels almost like breath on his skin. He begins to realize the figure is tied to the house's nightly ritual. Each time the house counts an extra number, the figure finds him. And each time it finds him, it stands just a little nearer than before, as though preparing for a moment when it will no longer need to keep its distance at all. Centers on the moment Rafik uncovers the truth hidden within the house's old ledger, and expanding it reveals how this discovery transforms his fear into a realization that escape may no longer be possible. After enduring nights of the pale figure's silent presence and the house's unnerving midnight ritual, Rafik becomes desperate to find something, anything, that explains what is happening. The caretaker avoids him entirely now, slipping away whenever Rafik approaches, leaving meals at the door without speaking. This silence drives Rafik to search the house on his own. One evening, shortly before midnight, he enters a small storage room near the back of the house. The air is thick with dust, and the dim bulb flickers overhead like it's struggling to stay alive. Among the cluttered shelves and forgotten tools, Rafik finds an old wooden box covered in cobwebs. Inside lies a heavy leather-bound ledger, its pages yellowed and brittle. He takes the book to his room and opens it cautiously. The first pages contain handwritten entries spanning decades, each listing names of guests who stayed in the house. At first, this seems ordinary, but as he reads, a pattern emerges. Every page ends with a number followed by a phrase written in a shaky hand, counted at midnight. The numbers always match the number of guests listed, except for a recurring final entry that is consistently higher by one. Rafik flips through page after page, realizing that every time the house counted one extra guest, someone from the list vanished from future records, as though they were erased from existence after their stay. Some entries abruptly stop mid-sentence. Others have been crossed out violently, black ink tearing through the paper. The unease in his chest thickens as he reaches the final section of the ledger. The last few pages are blank at first glance, but faint impressions appear when he tilts the book toward the lamplight. Recent names begin to surface, written softly, as though someone pressed the pencil too lightly. His breath catches when he recognizes the caretaker's handwriting. Then he finds his own name written neatly in the middle of an otherwise empty page. Beneath it is a date, tomorrow. His stomach twists as he realizes the house has already decided his fate, placing him into its records before anything has even happened. And then he notices a faint, penciled number just below the date, a number identical to the one the house whispered on the night it first counted him. As he stares at his name, the room's temperature begins to fall, and the familiar cold breath crawls across his shoulders. He senses movement behind him, soft and steady, the same presence that had approached night after night. In that moment, Rafik understands the terrible purpose of the midnight count. Once the house speaks your number, you are already claimed. The entries in the ledger are not records, they are warnings written too late, testimonies of guests the house absorbed long before they understood the rules. And now he sees clearly that his name is no exception, marked by a future the house has already begun preparing for him. Rafik slammed the ledger shut, but the sound didn't echo, it was swallowed instantly, as if the room itself refused to let noise escape. His pulse hammered in his ears as he backed away, his eyes fixed on the door, calculating how many steps it would take to run. Yet before he could move, the hallway outside creaked. Slow, soft, deliberate. Like someone shifting their weight, preparing to walk. He forced himself forward, cracking the door open just enough to peek through. The corridor was nearly swallowed by darkness, the only light coming from the faint glow of the wall lamp at the far end. But even that flickered weakly, as though suffocated by something unseen. He stepped out quietly, holding his breath, straining to listen. The house was too silent, too still, like the moment before a predator pounces. Then the whisper began. 1. It drifted through the hallway, brushing against his ears like icy fingers. Rafik flinched, stepping back, but the whisper continued, moving slowly toward his room. 2. He turned and ran, bolting toward the staircase. The old wood groaned under his feet, every step echoing with frantic urgency. He grabbed the banister, ready to descend, when the temperature dropped in an instant. Frost began forming along the railing beneath his hand, creeping outward like veins of ice spreading through flesh. 3. He spun toward the source of the whisper. At the top of the stairs stood the pale figure, no longer blurry, no longer distant. Its face had sharpened into something human-like but wrong, skin stretched too thin over bone, eyes dark voids that swallowed all light. It stepped forward without sound, its presence dimming the lamp behind it until the hallway plunged into shadow. Rafik stumbled backward, nearly falling down the stairs. The figure descended each step with unnatural precision, its movements too smooth, too controlled. The whisper continued, though its mouth never moved. 4. The final number. Rafik burst through the front door, the storm's cold air slapping against him, rain soaking him instantly. He sprinted across the wet grass toward the road, not daring to look back. But the world behind him shifted, and a deep groan rippled through the ground. The house was changing again, stretching, twisting, dragging something heavy through its corridors. The front door slammed shut on its own, and every window glowed with a sickly, pulsing light. Thunder rolled overhead, but beneath it, he heard the low rumble of the house's floorboards moving. Not randomly. Not blindly. Following him. He reached the road just as a passing truck's headlights cut through the darkness. He waved frantically, screaming for help. The truck skidded to a halt, and the driver leaped out, grabbing Rafik by the shoulders. The man asked what had happened, but Rafik could only point toward the hill. The hill was empty. No house. No lights. No sagging porch. Just rain-soaked grass and a dark, indifferent horizon. The driver insisted nothing had ever stood there. Not for decades. Rafik turned slowly back toward the emptiness, trembling as the truth settled like ice in his veins. The house had erased itself the moment it finished its count. And as the driver helped him into the truck, Rafik felt a chill spread across his spine. A whisper, faint and near silent, breathed against the back of his ear. 4.